And that didn't go over real well with Vince.
What did he say?
So, fuck that, to quote him. And I answered his question, but I also got Steph, and I informed her what happened. Well, it double backfired, because then Vince chewed her out, and then chewed me out, and then I get chewed out by both of them at the same time. And I don't know if I could have handled it in a different way. I was just put in some really shitty situations. I think that because of my relationship with Vince over the years, that I would speak to him in a way, see how I phrase this right, that I could get away with, that other people couldn't speak to him like.
Yeah.
I could say, fuck that. Anybody else to say that would be very disrespectful.
Right.
However, I do feel that Steph looked at that I was disrespecting not only her father, but the chairman of the company.
It's important to mention in all of this, you're doing that as someone who's worked with him for more than 20 years.
Correct.
And when we say work with, we mean once upon a time, there wasn't a Titan Towers, and there wasn't a shareholder meeting, and there wasn't 12 pay-per-views a year, and this wasn't $1 billion company, and there weren't 2 writing staffs. It was 3 dudes sitting around a pool in Connecticut. Hey, what about this?
Exactly. So I had that relationship with Vince. I don't think Vince ever took it as disrespectful. But I also, again, hey, devil's advocate, hindsight being 20/20, being able to step back and look at it. I can see where Stephanie was right saying, hey, when you say that in front of other people, they don't know your relationship with Vince of 22 plus years.
That's a fair criticism.
So when they hear you say it, then that makes right.
Yeah, they feel justified in saying it.
Right. So she's right in that regard. I just was set in my ways, an old timer, crotchety old man that was set in my ways. And here's this young whippersnapper coming in, and she thinks she knows everything because she's the boss's daughter. And I never really viewed her that way. I viewed her as Steph. I viewed her as very bright. We had differences of opinion all the time. The fact that I had differences of opinion with Vince, to me, worked. To Vince, it worked because I didn't share his ideas. I didn't share his point of view on a lot of things. So we argued about a lot and could work things out. With Steph, if you disagreed with her, I think sometimes she took it as being insubordinate and trying to, I don't know.
Well, let's run through that because I know a lot of people are going to say that, oh, we're kissing ass or whatever. But also, too, she's kind of in a lose-lose situation, too. I've never been in this situation. I do work with my parents, but I started my company. So in a weird way, my parents work for me, which is an interesting dynamic. But I can imagine in a situation like this, everybody feels like they can just bypass her and that whatever she's thinking about or whatever is important to her, doesn't matter because in the end, we can just go over you. You're only here because of your daddy. And so she needs to exert some control every now and again, I'm sure. And she needs to be cognizant of how things look. And so that matters. How things look matter more maybe to her than they do to Vince, who is without question. I mean, he is the unquestioned rather, alpha and omega of the company. And what he says goes, and there's no negotiation in that. And there's no worry about how things look or are perceived. But in her case, she's got to be more mindful of that.
Very true. And that's fair because people look at her as
she's only here because of this or that. And we don't have to really, and you better watch out for her and blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure she had to deal with some of that, but where people were just dismissive of her talents and just assume that she can contribute nothing simply because her last name was McMahon. So instead of her being smarter and better at this because her last name is McMahon, on some level, she's viewed as being more inept and inadequate because she's only here because she's a McMahon. Not saying that she is. I'm just saying that's certainly a line of thinking.
And the flip side of that, too, Shane and I used to look at each other sometimes after some of the ass chewings we used to get. And he would just laugh because we would get the ass chewing 10 times what anybody else would, because
he knew you.
Yeah, he knew me. Shane was his kid. Stephanie was his kid. So those ass chewings were 1,000 times worse than anybody else's.
Right.
Because of that comfort level with us. So, yeah, and I was on that same plane, so I felt for the kids. I felt for both Shane and Stephanie in that regard. It sucked. So it was a no-win, kind of rock and hard place, and I understood the decision, man. I wasn't the most cooperative, and hindsight being 2020 on dealing with Vince, I don't know how I could have done that differently. I really and truly don't, and I've tried. But maybe I could have dealt with Steph differently, and I think I could have dealt with her a little bit differently and been able to massage that situation better.
So here's where it's not cutting time. There's rumor and innuendo out there, and I heard this for the first time 2 years ago. But people who are listening, not all of them, many of them have heard this. There's rumor and innuendo that the real reason you're not there is you pulled a gun on some writers. And I don't know how that got out there. And I don't know exactly the context of which this is reported and spanned. It wasn't in any major news releases. The news websites said that they felt like you weren't necessary because Stephanie had kind of stepped into your role. But then there's this groundswell of, well, Bruce pulled a gun on that guy. And some of that comes from a Nova shoot interview with RF Video. Set the record straight. You pull a gun on some dudes?
Yeah, Bruce had a gun. It was Hurricane Ike. We left our home in League City, Texas, and I had a gun in the house, and we were told to evacuate, so I took the gun with me. Went up to Athens, Texas, to John Layfield's house with my family. But I had to get to TV, which was in Nashville. I didn't want to leave my wife and kids with a gun in Layfield's house, and I was driving, so I took the gun with me. While there, I was going to fly back. I was told, well, turn in your rental car. I had planned on driving back to Athens, pick up my family, and then go home. But while there, I was told, hey, you got a rental car. Just turn the rental car in. We'll fly you home. So I got Bruno Lauer. We were in Nashville, and I got Bruno to get me he had a gun box with a lock on it. And I asked the head of security, I said, hey, I've got a gun. I got to get it back on a plane. What do I do? And he says, well, here's what you do. You got to get a box. It's got to be locked. You got to have a key, and then you've got to check it. You've got to claim it at baggage, but you have to check it, and you have to fill out all this paperwork. So Bruno knew I had a gun. Security guy knew I had a gun. In addition to that, the last night of the TV.
Did you say the security guy's name?
It was Jim Kelly.
Okay.
Great guy. Real nice guy.
Super nice guy. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a few times. Really, really cool guy. Former NFL background. Couldn't be a nicer guy.
Yeah, he's cool as shit. So I went, and some guys asked me to go out that night, and I told them that I had to put my gun up in the safe. People knew I had the gun, and stories kind of go from there. So the story gets back that Bruce pulled the gun, and that was one thing Stephanie asked me. I told her the story, and we talked about other things, and we disagreed, and she says, well, I'm going to ask you to leave, and if you don't, like that, I mean, basically you can leave now. We were in Boston.
Whoa, you're skipping around.
Well, we talked about a lot of things. We talked about the issue with the stuff with Vince that I just went over, and then she said, then there's this gun issue.
She calls a meeting.
She calls a meeting in Boston before the Survivor Series.
So this is November of 2008.
Yes.
And when she calls a meeting, this is during the show, right before the show, right after the show?
No, she asked me to come in early.
Okay.
Early before the show. So I came in before anybody got there. And then she asked me about the gun. She asked me if I'd pulled a gun on someone. I said no. And she said, we went on, and I'm going to ask you to leave. And I said, okay. I got up and left. And it was that cut and dry. From there, and I'm thinking about this, and I just thought, God damn, man, this is fucking crazy. And I told her the whole story. I told her the Ike story and going, and she said, I can't believe you brought a gun to work. I said, okay, I did. Sorry, fucked up. But a week later was the next time we talked. She asked me not to speak to anybody.
Hang on, let me ask this though. She says, you brought a gun to work, so you're fired.
No, she didn't say I was fired.
Okay, but
no, she didn't.
Did she accuse you of pulling the gun on someone?
She asked me if I did.
And you said no?
Yes.
And did she say other people said you did?
No, she said she would look into it.
Okay.
She said that she asked me to leave. So I left, and she asked me not to speak to anybody, and asked everyone not to speak to me.
Who else was in the room when this happens?
No one. Just me and Steph.
Who's outside? Somebody. It's not just you two guys off in the corner. There's somebody nearby.
No, it's me and Stephanie in the room by ourselves, and Hunter was outside.
Okay. Where's Vince?
He wasn't there.
Did you see Vince at all that day?
Nope.
When had you most recently talked to Vince before this meeting?
Probably the week before.
Had you been on vacation for the 2 weeks leading up to this?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I think I had.
The only reason I know that is because it comes out on WrestlingInc.com. As reported earlier, WWE released Bruce Prichard on Monday. He had been with the company for 22 years, with the exception of a brief time period. His firing was a Stephanie McMahon call. As noted last night, Prichard was not at TV the past 2 weeks, and people were told he was on vacation. Stephanie had been negative on Prichard in recent years, as she saw him as Vince McMahon's biggest yes man. She's buried him in the past, sometimes in front of others at creative meetings, believing he was not paying attention and or giving non-committal answers. She made the official call to cut him loose. With Prichard being a senior member in WWE, he had a large contract that Stephanie could justify cutting, although he often complained about taking a pay cut when he moved from head of talent relations to creative. In the past, he was an important member of the creative team, but not so much in recent months. He had largely lost contact with Vince. He was supposed to attend meetings at WWE's headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut 2 weeks every month, but more recently it was more like 2 days every 8 to 10 weeks. The creative team was not giving a reason regarding his dismissal from the company. Bruce Prichard is the brother of Tom Prichard, who currently works with WWE's developmental talents in Tampa, Florida. Bruce Prichard has had numerous drug problems in the past, which caused him to miss job promotions in the company as a result. He was supposed to land the head of television role. Producer Kevin Dunn ended up taking. Since 2004, WWE required Prichard to take urine tests once per week. Regarding his future, it wouldn't be surprising to see Prichard wind up in TNA. He is close to TNA wrestler Jeff Jarrett, since both of their wives have battled cancer. Prichard was quite upset when Jarrett's wife Jill passed away last year as a result of the disease, to the point that some people were worried about him. Prichard was a major supporter of Undertaker and John Bradshaw Layfield. In fact, Prichard is listed as one of the VPs of JBL's company. So let's poke that up right fast. Were you taking drug tests once a week?
No, but I did take random drug tests, yeah.
What prompted that?
The rumor and innuendo that I took a lot of drugs.
Did anybody?
So, and just to be clear on that, that was actually a suggestion of mine I said, okay, hang on, guys. If you're going to accuse me of doing drugs and having a drug issue, test me. Fucking test me.
So is somebody ratting you out? Is somebody saying they saw you passed out at a hotel, or you're, asleep at the wheel, or you're
hey man, I had my fair share of partying. I had my fair share of times where I was fucked up, but I wasn't fucked up when I was at work. And again, rumor and innuendo. So when they go, Bruce, you partying too much. Hey, if you think I'm partying too much, if you think I'm doing drugs, test me. And show me one test ever that I've ever failed, because you can't. I never have, ever. I've never been to rehab for drugs, alcohol, anything else, and I've never failed a drug test, ever.
And you've never been arrested for drugs?
Never been arrested for drugs.
Brother Love liked to smoke weed and drink. True?
Oh yeah, Bruce loved to smoke dope and fuck yeah.
Anything else? Did you do too many somas once upon a time, like so many other wrestlers we've heard in the past?
I used to take somas too. Yeah, you take somas, you take painkillers, you take Valium. But I like to come down because I'm always up here all the time, so I like to take something to relax.
But in your perspective, you never had an issue with any of those prescriptions.
Anybody who takes recreational drugs will tell you, no, they never had a problem with any of that. In my mind, no, I never did. And no, I never went to rehab. And no, again, I never failed a drug test either.
Did you feel like you were ever...
And they were all observed too.
Who would look at that Willie for you?
Oh, they would have someone come into the room with you.
Who was the who's the hog watcher?
No, you had to go. You had to go in, and they had like someone from the drug testing thing.
Oh, okay.
You had to drop your pants to your knees, and then pee. Pull your shirt up. I kid you not, man. You had to pull your shirt up to your chest, drop your pants, and pee.
It says in here that you were supposed to go 2 weeks every month to Stanford, but you kind of slacked on that. Is that a fair criticism?
Well, especially, no, that's not a fair criticism. The funny part about that, and especially at this time, like you talk about my 2 weeks before I came back there, I would save up my vacation time, and I would save up my vacation time to take it around the holidays so that I could kind of skip when we would do those long TVs and we would do 3 and 4 TVs in a row. I would time my vacation so that I would miss the multiple days on the road. So during that vacation time, it would be, you don't need to come in during that. Come into the office. So I would lose that extra week in the office where I would be, instead of 2 weeks, I would only do 1 week in November, and then I would do 1 week in December. That's all. And that was the only time of the year. And Vince, I remember, caught on to it and said, God damn, pal, you and this Christmas vacation is getting fucking ridiculous. You ever think about taking vacation during the summer like everybody else? I said, no, because everybody else takes it during the summer. So I want to be home with my family during the holidays.
Let me ask this. As you're kind of talking about shuffling and vacation and stuff like that, people on this very podcast network in the past have said that you were lazy. Was that a perception that comes from your creative vacationing aspect here?
No, it was probably perceived that I was lazy because I was in Houston and they were all in Stanford. So, well, they're all in a room having to work in an office. I'm at home waiting for them to call me.
That's a pretty good gig. What do you make of the, assertion here that you could have been in Kevin Dunn's spot, but you were?
That is absolutely hilarious because when I came back in 92, that was when John Filippelli was on his way out, and Kevin Dunn had put together the business plan and proposal to move him into that spot with 2 other guys. So I was never in consideration to be the executive producer, and that was always Kevin Dunn post John Filippelli. So I don't know where the hell that one comes from.
Nova, in his shoot interview and this report here, both attributed to Stephanie, both have a narrative that you were a Vince McMahon yes man. Is that a fair criticism?
Absolutely not. And I think if you were asked Vince McMahon that question, he would agree with me and tell me that I was probably the furthest thing from a yes man. I disagreed with him more than anybody.
This says in here, she's buried him in the past, sometimes in front of others at creative team meetings for not paying attention and or giving non-committal answers. Do you remember her trying to embarrass you in a meeting like that?
No, I really don't.
So that's just somebody freestyling some bullshit?
Yeah, I think so.
So when you get... Oh, this is worth mentioning. It says that you had kind of fallen out of favor with Vince. Did you go through a period where you and Vince weren't getting along and weren't speaking regular?
In the 90s, yes.
But not here?
No, not at this point, no.
So in 2008, we're in November, Survivor Series in Boston. Triple H is outside the door. When you walk out the door after she said, I'm going to ask you to leave, this is before the pay-per-view starts. Do you speak to Triple H as you exit the room?
I said goodbye, yeah.
Is there any sort of thank you or take care? Or
absolutely no, nothing.
You don't speak to anyone else and you just leave?
I just left, yep. Walked out the door, got a taxi, went to the airport.